If asked what the biggest challenge Korea faces in the long run, I'm sure many Koreans these days will say it is the population problem. Indeed, fewer babies, fewer young workers, and also ever-growing size of Korean elderly people in retirement. What is Korea doing about them, and what can be done further? That's what we want to talk about today in this program, Upfront.
It's 2016, and the Korean society has been given a huge warning about the risk of a demographic cliff. It refers to a range of social issues caused by a severe decline in population. One of the biggest factors behind the declining population is declining fertility rate. The annual average fertility rate in Korea as of 2015 was 1.3. This is one of the lowest in the world. The economically active population in Korea has been in decline since 2006, and the rate of decline is steadily rising. Decline in labor force is not the only problem resulting from a declining population. As the society ages, increased burden on the welfare system and aged poor will become even more serious problems. According to Statistics Korea, the proportion of population aged 65 and over surpassed 10% of the total population in 2010. If this trend continues, the proportion is expected to reach 40% by the 2060s. While the working population decreases, there will be a larger number of older people who need welfare. The government has been implementing a basic plan to address this issue every 5 years since 2006. It recently adopted the third basic plan to deal with the low birth rate and aging society from year 2016 to 2020.
지난 10년간 출산율 감소의 가장 큰 원인은 초혼 연령의 상승에 따른 만혼화 현상입니다. 주거 문제도 결혼을 망설이게 하는 장애물이 되고 있습니다. 신혼부부가 선호하는 입지에 목돈 부담 없이 살 수가 있는 행복주택과 같은 임대주택 공급을 대폭 늘려야 할 것입니다.
Upfront takes a deeper look at the current population structure of Korea and discusses possible solutions to the population problem.
Well, as I mentioned at the opening, this is one of the most biggest, perhaps, the serious challenge that Korea faces. So more than ever before, this topic is very important for us. For that reason, we have brought in very prestigious and authoritative guests this time for today. Starting with Professor Lee Hyun-chong, who is the head of Graduate School of Education of Hanyang University. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And also Professor Lee Ji-man from the Yonsei University. He is a member of Presidential Committee on the Low Birth and Aging Society. Thank you very much for joining us. And also Professor Kwon Soon-man, the president of Korean Gerontological Society. Thank you very much for joining us. And Dr. Lee Soo-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at Korean Women's Development Institute. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, let's start with some of the numbers here. You know, in Korean media these days, we have a lot of different reports about how serious the overall situation is. Different people say different things, but in terms of what economists define as economically productive population from age 16 through 64, they are saying that it is we will hit the peak perhaps. We might have hit the big peak already last year, and it will start declining this year. But when we take a look at the core productive age group, that is 25 to 49, some of the reports are saying that population has been indeed in decline for the last 7 years. And some people are saying, well, actually many media outlets are saying that Korean population with this current trend will hit zero. There will be no more Koreans left by year 2750, 2750. Any problems, any issues with these numbers? Are they making sense to you?
Seems to me it may possible, it may not possible. Because if we don't set up the productive, very effective and population policies, I think it's according to Statistic Korea, there's many indicators, many warning signs. For example, people aged 9 to 24 make up 19.5% of the population this year. This will be dropped to later on. Also, a survey found that less than half of 45.6% of young women have to marry. In other words, 55% of young women, they not necessarily have to marry, okay? They will be single.
Sure.
That's one problem. Also, age population, so the labor age
Right.
groups is drop sharply, you already mentioned. And by 2060, that's a really big, serious problem. The educational population also dropped very sharply by starting with 2018, which means the next year, the following year. And then 2023, there's about 260,000 student shortage will be.
Boy.
With simple statistical figures, maybe over 100 universities disappeared. That's a serious problem. seems to
You
me.
mentioned universities disappearing, and I'm sure there will be schools closing and all that kind of stuff. Elementary schools, middle schools, many
Sure.
schools might have to be closing, and teachers may have to lose their jobs
Right.
and so on. So serious consequences we are talking about. But let's focusing on the labor population, the economically productive population, and young workers. What is the impact that we are seeing when we see their numbers declining here in Korean economy? I'm sure, first of all, the less production is one, but what are some of the economic impact that economists have been talking about so far?
In terms of low fertility rate and aging society, we are going to very serious situations. I want to divide our population into three groups. The first one is the Angbang and childhood population. It's under 14 years old.
Okay.
The second one is working age populations and from 15 to 64 years old.
Is 15 to 64 classification, does it make sense these days? Or don't we have to focus more on 25 to 49?
That's a core working
okay.
population.
Okay.
But it's the working age population is 15 to 64 years.
Okay.
And the aged population is over 65 years. In terms of the population proportion, the 14th for the first group.
14?
Yeah, 14, 1
Okay.
4. And the 72% belonging to working age population.
Okay.
In terms of the aging society, the working age population will decrease
course.
up to 50
50.
in 2050. That
Okay.
it means we will have less 10 million workers.
Supporting
35 years late. Yeah.
this such a little number of young workers having to support the elderly Koreans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the aged population will increase
I see.
by 10 million
Oh,
in 2005. Then who will support them financially? That's a problem that we face now.
I see. Professor Kwon.
Well, I agree with you, but there might be one caveat, especially from a elderly population's perspective, because we only think about labor force from like 20 to 64.
Right.
But health status or labor capacity of the elderly population changes. Like health status of 60-year-old person 20 years ago is much worse than the health status of the same age elderly person.
Right.
How about 20 years later? So if you fix the age threshold
Right.
as 64, 65,
Right.
then it's definitely true that the young labor force will decline. But if you extend the age threshold, considering the much improvement in the health status of the elderly population,
Right.
the decline in labor force may not be as fast as we are worried about.
I see. I think that's one positive note to add in this very pessimistic discussion that we are having today. Dr. Lee, overall, the birth rate that we have in Korea, what do they say? Women, on average, the number of babies they are expected to have through their lifetime is what? 1.2 babies here in Korea?
A little less than that.
Less
now.
than that.
Yeah,
How does
yeah.
it compare with other countries?
Well, we have a whole range of the childbirth rate in the world, but the what's for sure is we are at the lowest bottom of that echelon, and the interesting thing is that the more advanced and the more family-friendly countries have a higher fertility rate. So, yeah, we cannot really say that definitely what was that,
Right. And they're saying probably the Europe's case on average, I'm sure they have different numbers here, but Europe's average is about 2 babies per woman. And Korea already passed that point a long time ago, like 1980s. So it makes perfect sense that Korea remains at the bottom of any kind of scale that we are talking about, whether OECD or worldwide.
Yes, OECD, for example, I added some. I think our birth rate right now at 1.25. That's the lowest level among 34 OECD countries. That is a serious problem.
Right,
Yes.
indeed.
Yeah, also you had the bottom birth rate in 2005. It was 1.08. It was
that's about 10 years.
Yeah, it was worst situation.
Right.
In 1960s, you had the 6th birth rate. It's very high in the birth rate.
Okay.
And but certainly the birth rate declined. But over 30 years, it has been in the low birth rate and the super birth rate. The super birth rate, it means under 1.3.
Okay. Then, Professor Lee Hyun-chong, what is the sustainable rate of giving birth? Currently, we are saying like somewhere around 1.2 or below 1.2. How higher up do we have to raise this?
I think it's one survey indicate that maintain its current infrastructure, its current population level. We need to birth rate boost up to 1.8. And also optimistically up to 2.0.
Oh, I see.
So it takes time, it seems to me.
When we try to pinpoint why Korea is the country that shows the highest decline, the highest rate of decline, fastest falling of the population, I guess the economists usually often say the cost of education and housing. Do we agree with those? I mean, value changes that are happening in other countries as well. And of course, gender inequality problem is serious in Korea, more than perhaps in other developed countries as well. But economics.
Yes, that's the key factors affecting to the low birth rate. I think it's because marriage and abortion cannot say not related to the economic issues because economic situation is good and the birth rate going up.
Right.
And also the longevity also it's elderly people's health is good too. So those things economically are driven both by the long live, but also by many children have. That's closely related to.
I see.
So there's especially in Korea, there's a serious problem, the housing problems you already mentioned. The youngsters cannot find the jobs. There's unemployment rate very high.
Right.
Those also child care system is not very good. Those areas, the educational poor people is spread out among in the whole society.
Right.
Those are major reasons affecting.
And high cost of private education.
Private education also.
So children just cost a lot. That's one of the key causes here. Then when we talk about the overall, the financial burden or fiscal burden, Professor Lee-man, what are we saying in terms of the burden that this society has to bear because of this changing population?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, although we are going to have a less working age population, we can get over the problems we face and to take and more female workers into labor markets. Then we should provide and the more favorable in the working conditions, and you said, and equalize the situation between male and female situations. That's the first
Are you
point.
talking about government spending?
Yeah, that's the first point you have to do and to get over the low fertilities. Also, the government should support aged persons with the national pensions, more national pension and better and medical insurance systems. Nowadays, current government spend 10% of government budget for public insurance or the public pensions. Then maybe in terms of the current situation trend, the budget will increase to 30%.
I see.
That is huge financial burden. That it means we need the financial resources. That it means sometimes we need the increased tax.
Right.
That it will be also burden for the next generations.
Right.
So maybe we have to find more jobs. Then if we provide more jobs for females and aged workers, then government can have more income tax
Right.
that they can save and insurance burdens. Yeah.
So more tax on increasingly older population, more Koreans who are getting old, actually, they'll have to pay more taxes in order to keep the balance here. But the thing is, are we ready for that? It is, many Koreans, increasing number of Koreans getting older, they're not in the position of paying more taxes, aren't they? So what are the problems of this aging society on the elderly people's side?
You're right. I mean, there might be several factors, but first factor can be we should have a better economy to provide more jobs for the elderly,
Right.
for them to work, such
Right.
that they should work and earn wages so that we can tax the ages. And also another very important part is health or functional status. If they are not healthy, they cannot work.
Right.
So good health or good functional status is a very important condition for them to work hard and work efficiently. Not just work, but their productivity should be high. Then they can contribute to the more higher taxes for the government.
So you're actually seeing, do you see older Koreans getting healthier and perhaps being able to work longer? Is that the overall prospect you see?
I guess, I'm sure, it's not just a Korean phenomenon, but around the globe, especially in high-income countries, the health status of the elderly is rapidly improving. So in terms of their capacity to work, it's okay. So, but another fact, especially in the case of Korea, we are struggling with creating more jobs.
Right.
So
Right.
there might be another barrier. But in terms of health status, they are getting better. But the speed of the improvement of health status of the elderly in Korea is definitely slower than the case of the high-income countries.
Korean government has been introducing so many different policies in order to turn around this trend as a whole. Why is it not working as much as people hope it to be? What's the reason behind the lack of sufficiency or outcome for Korean government policies?
In terms of low fertility rate or the
But
turning
the
over
population
people's
overall
age?
trend, right.
Yeah.
Korean government has been trying a lot.
I think it's because as we just discussed so far, the population issues are caused by multi-factors. And some of those factors can be changed by government intervention, policy changes. But there are so many other factors, as we just mentioned, like value systems, people's paradigm, attitude, that cannot be simply changed by government interventions. For example, the gender inequalities. There are some issues like workplace gender inequality, social security issues can be tackled by the government intervention.
Right.
But household gender inequality, like husbands are not willing to help their wife,
Right.
that issues, it cannot be simply changed by government. It's more like a value system. So that's why I'm thinking that the change in these population issues or fertility change is so slow, even when government puts a lot of resources in the policy
actually,
measures.
Right.
what you said is quite true, but even the government spending is not enough. It actually,
You're saying government should do more?
yeah, because
Okay.
according to the study, the Korean government spending on fertility is lower than most OECD countries. So the average value of the government financial support, as in the form of direct cash transfer and tax relief,
Right.
actually for two earners family compared to equivalent childless family is the average is 5.9%
see.
in OECD countries. In our country, it's less than 2%.
I
So it's not quite enough.
So government should spend more money.
Considering the increased rate of welfare systems, the Korea government spend and
Right.
You focus on the increase rate and rather than the absolute the amount of the welfare money.
I see. Right, right.
But
We have to
do we
consider-
consider this
yeah.
welfare though? The spending on
Depends.
fertility rate?
Depends.
Yeah, but you have to think of the speed and for increasing rate.
So she's talking about the growth rate of
Yeah.
the spending, and
Yeah.
you're saying the absolute amount itself might be big already?
Yeah, but I think you have to think the economic difficulties sometimes contribute to change of our values
I
and
see.
educate for children's education or
Sure.
to having baby or not, whether or not. But I think government should not solve and economic difficulties for young generations. And so young generation redundant to get married, redundant to have babies. If government and support and economically and to solve financial burdens for young generation, I think they'll have a more.
So let's talk about these policy points right after this. I think this is a good starting point for a second round of our discussion. And in the meantime, however, we will connect with an expert, overseas expert here, to ask him some questions about the overall concept that we are talking about. The person that we are connecting to is Mr. Harry Dent. He's the founder of the Dent Research and also author of a famous book, The Demographic Cliff. So let's ask him a few questions. Mr. Dent, are you on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, a lot of people believe that you're the one who coined the term, the demographic cliff. What does it actually mean? We in Korea have some vague idea about what it means, and we may be facing some kind of crisis here, but looks like you're indicating this is a global phenomenon. So tell us more about your concept that you have introduced.
Well, we've had this major baby boom birth wave around the world, later in different countries, and it keeps collapsing on their spending habits. People enter the workforce at age 20, they spend the most at age 46 to 47, and then they stop spending. So we predicted that Japan collapsed in the early 90s, which nobody saw coming because their baby boom was done with spending. The U.S. peaked in 2007, which we predicted way before, and now we declined, and Europe declined 3 to 5 years after us, and the whole world is printing money to stop this decline in spending, which you can't do.
And also, Mr. Dent, you said a dramatic change in terms of immigration policy may be necessary. How are we going to implement this kind of dramatic change in Korea? Any ideas and advice on that?
First of all, you should appreciate as a country how much your standard of living has gone up versus every other emerging country in history. But your demographic trends and your urbanization trends, which create the greatest wealth, are peaking. It's just that South Korea had later birth trends than Japan or even the United States. That's why you're peaking later in 2018. The problem is that if the world turns down, as we're seeing it doing in the next several years, your exports will suffer, even though your demographic trends your country spending are still strong. You're going to suffer from the rest of the world going down, especially China, which keeps slowing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dent, for your wonderful comments and perspective here. Okay, we are coming back to our discussion in studio here, and Mr. Dent was talking about the demographic cliff. Is it what we are facing here in Korea, or do we see a slightly different kind of aspect here in this country? What's your view on this?
I think it's the term of demographic cliff. It's a very strong term. But
shocking.
We are here. So Dr. Dent indicated 2018 will be a demographic cliff here. But I would like to, whether his prediction is really come or not, it's a good sign for us, warning sign for us. We have demographic issues that are a serious one.
Right.
It's will be a good lesson for us, I think. One thing we have to remind is, according to Oxford Institute, they say Korea is the last country in the reach demographic cliff, but the first country disappeared in the world.
Oh boy, that's really scary. And in terms of shocking values, what can we expect more than that? So we got to really act quickly here. And our wonderful panel members have already introduced some of the policy points we want to talk about further. But overall, what is the demographic structure that's desirable? We talked about overall rate of birth that's desirable, like 2.0 babies per woman here. What's the overall demographic structure in economics or demographics we talk about that's desirable for a country in general?
I think we had a 6th birth rate in 1960s, and now we have 1.25 last
6
year.
babies, when was the year?
1960s.
Okay,
There's a
right.
certain decline of our birth rate. It's a certain change of the demographic structure is not good.
Right.
We have to make incremental and gradual change of our population structures. Also, we think about our baby boomer and born between 1955
Right.
and the first baby boomer generation is to 1963. Second baby boomer generation
Right.
from 1964 to 1974. In
Okay.
total, the numbers of the baby boomer population and occupied 34% of our populations.
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they are going to aging. Sometimes they are passed away.
Right.
Then maybe at that time the birth rate was 6, but now we have now only 1.2.
Right.
Then who supplement and the baby boomers populations? Then maybe we will have a decline of our total populations. Last year we had 430,000 new babies. If we consider they live for 100, then in total population of our population will be 43 million. Now current population of Korea is 50 million. That it means less than 7 million in our population.
Big reduction.
Yeah, it's a big reduction, but it's not cliff. But it's it's a warning sign for our society.
So basically what Professor Lee-man has been saying is it's not exactly a cliff that we see in terms of population structure, but the ratio of it has been a little bit too fast. You're talking about this inverse, what do you call it, the triangle that shows too much of an angle here. And so we want to work on that by working on this kind of policies and so on. Then from this year on, what are we expecting in terms of the overall trend here? Because they're talking about, the Korean government has been talking about what the third 5-year plan for the Korean population. So we have had already first plan, second plan, and we're talking about the third plan being introduced and so on. So as a result of it, what are we seeing here starting from this year? Are we going to see something different, Professor?
Yeah, I think it is too late, but a little late. But I think it's a new year will be the significant starting point because the baby boomers are starting to retirement this year. So government introduced many good policies. You already mentioned 3 steps. First one is 1.3 million houses for young married couples. That is a good example of it, as well as a big budget allocations for solve these issues.
And that's about, in terms of current exchange rate, 26 to 28, or slightly less than billion US dollars. So it is a big money.
Yeah, big money annually. That's a good sign for solving this problem, I think.
I see. So we will hopefully see certain positive developments starting from this year. But the third 5-year plan, we understand the new focus, Dr. Lee, is on marriage, trying to speed up the marriage and try to encourage people who is not necessarily willing to marry, making them more willing to get married. Is that the main point of this third plan, and what's your evaluation on that?
Well, I think that's the new shift of the plan. And I don't disagree with that because we cannot afford that side either. But as everybody mentioned before, I mean, we have to put the whole melange of policies and measures to tackle on this very difficult problem.
But some people believe that we have already tried a lot of different things, such as like first and second 5-year plan, they were focusing on helping people to raise babies. And then the third one, also they're focusing on having more babies, but based on the experience on the first and second plan, they are now focusing on marriage. So is it natural shift?
Well, I think the problem was that even with all the policies, legislations, and plans, and the implementation was not very effective. So, I mean, that thing that encouraging marriages are also good, but we need to focus more on the implementation side still. So, for example, we have that, all the regulations and, encouragement for the companies to have to adopt that family-friendly policies. But as I said before, they are not really family-friendly. So we have the law that the parent with children under age 8 years old, can have each parent can have a year of parenthood. But actually the percentage of the people who take that the measure to apply for that parent leave is pretty low. In the case of men, even lower. And so,
but don't we see the rate increasing a little bit?
It increases, but it's like 5%.
Too slow.
5% of men last year had parent leave. But compared to Nordic countries and other more advanced countries, still very low, and it's not very effective. Only 5% of father take that parent leave, and the norm, the cultural norm, doesn't change.
And this is a very, very important issue here.
So I think the proposed policies included in the new plan, I hope they are effective, but I'm sorry, but I'm not very optimistic about that, because some of those factors, as you mentioned, and there are a lot of cultural issues, and for example, the issue of creating new jobs, it depends on the economy. But I think that I can take note of one important element, for example, support for fertility services, because we take a lot of focus on the marriage and having children, but we should not forget there are many people, young couple, who want to have a baby but cannot, because I mean, as people get married later in their life, it means becomes more and more difficult to have a baby. So there are many couples who cannot have a baby. Then it's quite a right approach that government decides to increase the financial support or security or health insurance support to those couples, because as you know, it's very costly to get those services from the hospitals.
And here at this point, why don't we connect with the second expert overseas, and let's ask him a few questions about this point that we've been discussing here, the effectiveness of government policy. So let's connect with Mr. Michael Teitelbaum. He is a law school professor at Harvard Law School, and he's an expert in demographics. So is he on? Yes, right. Dr. Teitelbaum, thank you very much for joining us here.
Pleasure.
Right. First question. In Korea, we've been introducing these 5-year policies so far, and we are having the third one. And recently, we had a third one introduced to be implemented starting from year 2020. There is some sense in Korea that the previous plans have not made as much of difference. What is your take on that? What are the important things about these kind of plans to make a difference or impact in reality?
It's a good idea for the Korean government to pay attention to this. The reason for slow response is that it will be slow. These things take a long time. It's really a change from one generation to another. It took a long time for fertility rates to come down in Korea, and it will probably take somewhat longer for fertility rates to rise if they do. So I think one should be patient. One shouldn't say, well, it hasn't worked for 5 years, so we're doing something wrong, or it hasn't worked in 10 years, so we have to do something else. I think you have to expect it to take a long time.
And lastly, not necessarily from other countries' cases here, but Korea-specific policies. If you have any other suggestions and ideas that we want to consider here, that'll be great. Please share with us your ideas.
Well, I think a lot of what is happening now has to do with the relative uncertainties that face young adults in Korea, many of whom are much more highly educated than the previous generation. And yet, in terms of jobs and careers, the middle-aged and older generation in Korea has much more certainty about their circumstances than young adults. And the second thing that's changed is that housing accommodation has become much more expensive in real terms, adjusted for inflation, than it was 30 or 40 years ago. So if you think about young adults in Korea, they are highly educated. Many of them want to have jobs and careers. I'm thinking especially of young Korean women. But in order to have a family, you have to first get married, and then you have to have accommodation if you want to have children. And you have to have a workplace that will be flexible enough to allow you to combine having a family and having a career. And I think those things need to be, those changes, those circumstances need to be addressed more effectively in Korea than has been done so far.
Okay, we are coming back to our discussion here. And in Korea these days, poverty rate among the elderly people, the number is shocking. They're saying like year 2014, the poverty rate among the elderly people was reaching about like 50%, 49.6% to be exact. What is happening here? Can you explain to us what's happening with the elderly population? Why are we seeing this kind of serious rate of poverty among the elderly people?
Because the current elderly population, they could not afford to prepare for their post-retirement life.
They're all investing their asset into future of children?
Future children, education. So that is one of the major reasons. And related issue is related to this poverty is that it's quite a shame that the suicide rate of Korean elderly.
As a result of poverty,
I think it's quite related.
Ending their lives.
Yeah,
okay.
because that is the highest in OECD countries.
Oh, okay.
So we should really definitely tackle this elderly population's poverty issues and suicide issues. And in that sense, I think I'm a bit positive that the recently introduced public pensions for the elderly should have some positive impact. Although I think that the current level or amount of pension for them is enough is a different question. In my view, I think government could do a little bit more to have a bigger impact. But I hope that it has some positive impact. And also, like a job creation is another issue, because job creation means that it has a positive impact on the income security of the elderly. Right. But another very important element is that when they work, when they participate in a lot of social economic activities, it has a positive impact on their health.
Ah, that's right.
So it has a
lengthen their life
Sure.
expectation.
Sure.
Okay. So the pension and the job policies possibly making some difference here. But Dr. Lee, we have also concern about women in this question, right? Actually, bigger than half of the elderly population is female, I can guess, right?
Sure.
And for them, what do we do here? There are certain things, policies about trying to help the former full-time housemaker and also the women who are trying to get their jobs in the older age. What kind of policies do we have and what kind of differences are they making?
Well, a lot of older women do not have pension. They don't benefit the pension. So these days, the government try to include more women in the pension system. So they try to give them that credit, that birth credit, actually, when they, they stay out of work for a while because of the childbirth. That period is included in the pension.
Oh, I see.
And we also, the government also try to encourage more women, even who those do not work, those do not work in the pension system.
So
Yeah.
those people do not work is a expression that may have problems, right? Those people who are working at home full time, they will enjoy the pension
Right.
benefits as well.
Right.
So those kind of coverage for women are expanding here, but overall, in terms of the big picture here, we were talking about baby boomers retiring and began retiring. Those people, the end of part of this baby boomer generation is those people who were born in 1963. And one of the professors here mentioned that retirement, we already see those people at that age retiring. Then how does this work with the new system of retirement age of 60? Korean government has introduced a new system here. Are we going to see a better turnaround this time as a result of this new system of retirement at the age of 60, making it easier for baby boomer generations? How is this going to policy work out in the future?
Well, I think in theory it should be positive, but I think it's a bit too early to predict the impact because the real impact of this policy will depend on the behavior of the business and industry.
What do you mean by that? Please?
Because, for example, even now, we all know that there are not many people who really work until the formal retirement age.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, there are a lot of layoffs before reaching a retirement age.
Right.
So maybe effective only in the public enterprises, but in the private sector, it may or may not work. So I want to be. I have some reservation at this point.
Indeed, people that I know in their early 50s, I see many of them actually retiring from their chaebol companies, corporations, and so on.
Right.
Do we have some kind of social policy to discourage these private corporations from doing so? Are they going to work, or are we going to continue on with this actual phenomena, despite the fact that we have 60-year age, retirement age policy or system in place? We will continue to see people in their 50s, early 50s retiring. What are we seeing here?
Yeah, first we have to think why government extend the retirement age up to 60 years old. And there were the time gaps between retirement age and the pension taking year. Although we started to retirement age of 60 years old, our national pension will take from 61 years. Every 5 years, and 1 year is delayed. Then in 2033, then also we will have the 5 years gaps between the retirement age and the pension taking year.
Because by that time, pension taking will start at the age of 65.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe if there is no any jobs, there is no any pension system within the gap years, then we can face the aged poor. But actually, to get off the aged poor situations, we have to give some pension or the creating jobs.
Right.
I prefer the creating jobs rather than giving the pensions. The pension maybe keep a lot of the financial burden to the government. And to create the jobs, we should rely on, first of all, the economic growth. But we are also facing low economic growth.
Right.
But it's very hard to increase the jobs in terms of the economic growth. Then you should have the sharing schemes in terms of the incomes, in terms of jobs, in terms of working hours. Then when we extend our retirement age up to 60 years old, we have to consider the sharing schemes.
Right.
But it's a big conflict between the stakeholders.
Yeah.
But it was too short time was given to us, and our government and revised the retirement age law.
Right.
30 years ago, we had only 30 years, but still we have a lot of the social conflict between among the stakeholders. Now it's a time we have to solve the conflict. Otherwise, it's very hard to stabilize the 60 years old.
Then, we've been talking a lot about the pensions for elderly people. How are we doing here? It looks like pension benefits are expanding and covering more people and so on. Are we doing okay with the pensions for elderly people in general, public pensions and then private pensions?
I think so, but pension is one of many elements affecting the welfare of the elderly.
Okay.
I think there are three major dimensions affecting the welfare of the old population. One is, as we mentioned, that economic security and pension.
Right.
That is very important. But there are another very important element is the health of the elderly population.
Okay.
For example, we all know that the cost of healthcare for the elderly is much higher
Right.
than that for younger population because they utilize more healthcare.
So keeping older people healthy is like saving money on the pension or spending.
Sure, because, and also another element is if you have a good, well-functioning health insurance system, we can provide better financial protection for the elderly.
Right.
Then that means their reliance on the pension might be decreased.
Right.
So it's closely related to each other. And also another issue is that not just health care, but all the population needs a lot of so-called long-term care. They need some assistance in their daily living.
Right.
So we, about 80 years ago, we also introduced another insurance system for long-term care. So long-term care insurance also affects the cost and welfare
That's
of...
national insurance.
Yeah, it's similar to the health insurance system and also managed by the health insurance agency, National Health Insurance Services. So, and also third important element is a participation, as you just mentioned. It's not just economic participation or participation in labor, but also participation in a lot of social activities, like community-based programs, because it has a very positive impact on the health of all the people. And also, it's a welfare of the happiness of all the population.
So I see a positive feedback mechanism
Sure.
there, right? If you provide those kind of programs, they'll stay healthier, they'll participate in economic activities more. So that positive feedback is something that we should keep in mind.
So these days we talk about active aging.
Active
Yes.
aging.
Active aging, that's
Seniors.
Yeah,
Right,
active aging.
Right. Okay, I think we're getting closer towards the end of our program here, so we want to discuss some of the bigger issues here. And when we talk about the population challenge that Korea faces, a lot of people are grim about it, kind of pessimistic about it. And when we are asking, what do you think is the fundamental solution to it? Some people say unification with North Korea would be one. Or some people say we will have to encourage younger people to have more babies. Of course, those are easy to say but hard to do solutions. Some people say, as a third alternative, they say, let's open up our immigration system and accept many more new immigrants into this country. Professor Lee Hyun-chong, what do you see about this option here? This is very un-Korean option, but then again, globally speaking, looks like some option, an option that we have to seriously consider. What do you see in talking about this option?
In my personal opinion, immigration policy or immigration is one of the alternative solution for population issues in Korea, I think. Previously, immigration means original strategy for minimize in the poverty and it avoid the risk, those kind of things.
Right.
This immigration, nature of immigration is different. So one scholar indicate that Korea needed to sustainable development.
Right.
We accept immigration of about 5 million.
5 million?
Yes, they say 10% will be a stable infrastructure. We can use it. I think the other one old solution, we have overseas Korean population is a 7 million population.
Okay.
That is one alternative way to invite them.
Bring them back?
Bring them back some,
Interesting,
and
okay.
back and forth. That's one solution to the manpowers and the experienced manpower, the well-educated manpowers. The nature-wide heritage also is Koreans.
Right.
So that's one solution. So immigration is not it's Koreans' burden, will be national development issues.
Right. So actually, many observers, as you mentioned, outside of Korea, saying, well, this is something that Korea must do: open up immigration market, immigration system here. I'd like to invite at least one more perspective on his point. Is it possible? Is it feasible? Is it going to be a workable option?
And before opening our labor market to the foreign workers, I prefer to increase economically active populations. Now the employment to population rate is 65, a little less than 66 percentage. That if we increase the employment to population rate up to 70%, we can have 2 million.
You mean raising the cap, like hiring more of older people in their 70s?
Female or the aged persons.
I see.
Yeah, think about it now. We are going to have a less and the working age population. That's a kind of the numbers But the 30% of the working age population are inactive workforce. Then if we change inactive workforce into the active workforce, then maybe we can get the more and the working persons. Then maybe you can get over the economic situation. But think about it, if we just make a hypothesis, next year our birth rate touched the 2.0.
Right.
But the new babies cannot enter the labor market. It takes 15 years old, 15 years. So we need to have a two dual and the policy tracks and to increase in the birth rate. Also to provide and the more active and the population.
I think two professors' points are well taken. Professor Lee Hyun-chong argued that immigration is a must thing and we'll have to open drastically our immigration system and actively accept immigrants into the labor force. At the same time, I don't think Professor Lee-man has rejected his idea, but on top of that, we should also let more older Koreans work in the labor market at the same time. So I think it makes perfect sense. To add one more point on our ending point, some people are saying that the silver industry, the industry that helps and enjoy based upon the growing size of all the population. What do we see? Is the silver industry really as hot as many people expect?
Well, for me, I have a hope for the role of the technology, and not just the industry, silver industry, but I would say technology and innovation.
I see.
On this population aging, especially population aging issues. Suppose, we are observing a very rapid progress in the biomedical technology. Has a huge impact on life expectancy. If people live beyond 100 years, then we don't, our population projections, like a zero population in 700 years later might be changed. And also it has a pharmaceuticals and medicine has a big impact on the health and healthcare of the old people. And also like robotics. It can suddenly increase the physical functioning of the old people, reduce their reliance on the assistance of others. So it has a big and positive impact on the population aging, but there is one caution.
What is?
Because there is access issues. Because, okay, let's say the technology is available, but is it going to be available for all people? Or is it going to be available only for the high income or better educated people? So, technology innovation is very important, but at the same time, from a policy perspective, we should work hard to assure the equal or fair access to this technology over all the population.
I think that's a very important reminder because when I was thinking about the silver industry, I was thinking about canes and some more the rails being built around the rooms and stuff. But bio, IT, all advanced technology industry could be also helped by this overall trend. As our wonderful panel members pointed out, this is one discussion that needs a lot more time, but we'll have to close our discussion here at this point. I want to thank you big time for all wonderful perspectives and opinions today. And we also want to thank our viewers who have joined us from all around the world to have a better understanding of this so-called the biggest challenge that Korea faces, that is the population problem. And I hope our discussion today was helpful in terms of furthering your understanding about it. And also I have to add, in order to tackle other problems and have better understanding of other issues that Korea face, you will have to join us once again next time here in this program, Upfront. Until then, goodbye.